After 123 days in charge of Rangers, it is all over for Russell Martin. He couldn't make it to Christmas. Heck, he couldn't even outlast Stephen Presley in the sack race. But the big question is, where did it all go wrong for Mr. Martin? Welcome back, guys, to Fog Football. Today we're going to be looking at Russell Martin's Rangers career, his short Rangers career. Can you even call it a career? Maybe a cup of coffee at Rangers would be more appropriate, but knowing Russell Martin, he probably likes to drink that soy milk. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about his veganism or what kind of milk he likes to put in his coffee or what he likes to drink, but the Russell Martin Kool-Aid, it wasn't getting drunk by the fans, okay? They weren't buying into what this guy was doing, and after 123 days, unfortunately for him, his time at Rangers comes to an end. Now, yeah, it was funny seeing these banter years, and it was funny seeing Rangers being an absolute joke and, you know, losing. Not just being unable to beat teams, but Rangers were being dominated by teams that have no right to do so. And, you know, Russell Martin, he must be hands down the worst manager in Rangers history. I can't really recall how Pedro Caixinha and how Paul Le Guen, I can't really remember how their teams played exactly, but surely they weren't getting dominated by newly promoted Falkirk. Surely they weren't very lucky and fortunate to sneak last-minute draws against the likes of Dundee, who have got Stephen Presley, the biggest walloper, I think, in Scottish football, in charge. A guy that just doesn't seem to know where he is, a space cadet. I think Stephen Presley could have won the sack race, and he wouldn't even care. He wouldn't care if he's out of a job. But anyway, Russell Martin, where did it all go wrong for him? I would say it probably went wrong for Russell Martin when he came north of the border and he left his girlfriend Lucy Pinder behind in England. It's like, I mean, you've just bagged her. Why would you even bother coming to Glasgow to try and bag some goals for Rangers, which he didn't do, by the way. This guy, I mean, you look at Rangers' goal scoring record, it's abysmal. One of the lowest scoring teams in the Scottish Premiership outside of Aberdeen. And I mean, let's be honest, Aberdeen, can we even count them as a team? Hadn't even scored a goal up until lucky number 7. But even Aberdeen were good enough to put 4 past Stephen Presley's Dundee. The same Stephen Presley's Dundee where Rangers needed a dodgy 93rd minute penalty in order to even snatch a point. So that goes to show you how good they are. Or maybe it just shows you how bad Dundee are. Or maybe they're both bad. But anyway, where did it go wrong for Russell Martin? I think you could argue it went wrong on day one. Forget about leaving whoever behind in England. I think it probably went. I think it went bad from day one when he signed the contract, when he became Rangers manager, because nobody seemed to want him. And I'm not making excuses for Russell Martin, but it must be shit when you go into a new job and you know that you weren't wanted and literally nobody wants you. It's like, if you go into a normal job, even if you're not the number 1 candidate, you know, if you're the number 2 or number 3 selection, you're normally going to be welcomed in with open arms. But with Russell Martin, it's almost like he knew he wasn't the number 1 or the number 2, and for whatever reason, maybe he just got the job because others couldn't agree. And pretty much the fans were saying from day one, this is going to be a bad appointment, he's not Rangers calibre. And yeah, I guess with hindsight, they were right. But I mean, it must be a shite feeling for Martin to go into the job knowing that nobody wants him there and nobody thinks that he can do the job. Now, you could argue, you could spin it and you could say, well, that would give Russell Martin ammunition. That would give Russell Martin motivation to prove the doubters wrong. Russell Martin could have went into this job with a chip on his shoulder. Does he even eat chips? I don't know. Does he eat chips? Probably not. But you could argue he could have went into this job with a chip on his shoulder and proved people wrong. But he didn't seem to do that, although he did bring it up in multiple press conferences that nobody wanted him here anyway when asked about his future. And I think when he started saying that, I think the writing was on the wall. But we'll have a look here through the Rangers results. We'll have a look at the signings as well, and maybe in another video we'll rank all the Russell Martin signings, even though I could argue that this early it's kind of hard to do that. But at the same time, I think we've seen enough for the majority of them. Well, some of them we haven't even seen yet, but I think we've seen enough from the majority of them to kind of give a a fair reflection on how they're going to go down. But we'll have a look at the Russell Martin results, and we'll kind of determine where it all went wrong. Because I think I know where the wheels started coming off this Russell Martin bus. And no, it's not when the Rangers fans blocked it and wouldn't allow him out of Falkirk. I think they came off a long time ago. But let's get into it. Alright, so firstly we'll quickly have a look at the signings that he brought in and the players that left under his tenure. Now, Lyle Cameron and Oscar Cortez can't have anything to do with Russell Martin. You cannot blame him or praise him for those signings. The Lyle Cameron one was already done back in January, and the Oscar Cortez one, Rangers had already agreed to pay the $4.5 million, so none of them have anything to do with Russell Martin, as far as I'm aware. Right, now I think Max Aarons, he was the first official signing, I believe, in the Martin era, and so far he's done nothing. He's been diabolical. You could argue he cost them in the Champions League, although they would have went out anyway, but he kind of started the downfall in that game. He's been pants. Yeah, he got a late winner against Livingston, and maybe Max Aarons kept... He might have kept Russell Martin in a job for a week longer, but that's really all he's done. That's all he's contributed. Joe Rothwell, this guy came in, apparently really good. Oh, he's a star player and getting Leeds promoted and all this stuff. He's been garbage for Rangers, he really has been. Emmanuel Fernandez, $3.5 million, barely played a game. I think he's only had he's had 2 appearances. And yeah, this guy looks like an absolute failure of a signing. Tello Osgaard, again, he scored 4 goals for Norway, but I mean, I think he could play for 4 years for Rangers, and he doesn't look like scoring a goal. He looks to be a really, really, poor signing. I don't think he's going to do anything. De Giga looked alright in his first couple of games, has looked pretty shit since then. Gazam looks to be the best of the bunch, $2.2 million. That seems to be a steal. Yeah, he's got games where he doesn't look great, but I mean, overall, I think he's been the standout player so far, and he looks like someone that could maybe, improve even more under someone that's not Russell Martin. Got Mikey Moore, I think he's been garbage. Ant-Man, people raved about him after 1 game, hasn't really done much since then. Magoma has came in at left back, pretty much the only left back Rangers have. Bojan Miovski hasn't really hit the heights so far. I know it's early days, but doesn't look like the player he was at Aberdeen. You got Shermiti, who this seems like money laundering to me, $8 million. This guy was never worth it. And then Derek Cornelius, who seems okay, looks like he could be a decent player, and I think the partnership at the back could be him and Suter for the future. But anyway, that's the players that Russell Martin brought in. Minus Gassam, it's not been great. Now, maybe some of them will come good, but I think Gassam's the only guy that you can sit and really give pass marks to. Yes, Cornelius, it's pretty early to judge him, but the rest of them, I think, so far have been poor. They've been poor for Rangers, and they've not hit the pass marks that you would be expecting. Right, we've got pre-season friendlies. I'm not going to count these, but some of them weren't very... I mean, losing to the New Saints, the writing should have been on the wall then. But, that's abysmal, losing to them. But it is what it is. I mean, it's crazy that Rangers actually drew with Club Brugge in that friendly, and it certainly wasn't a draw. They would have begged for a draw when they played them in the Champions League later on. But, yeah, there you go. In terms of his pre-season friendlies, not great. Only 2 wins out of 6. Those wins coming against lower league Scottish opposition. Right, it was some overall there, but let's get into the competitive matches then. So, Russell Martin began his Rangers career competitive with a 2-0 win over Panathinaikos, and that's a good start. Whether you think Rangers deserved to win that game or not, it was a good start, it was a win. Curtis and Gassam getting the goals. Yeah, Panathinaikos were down to 10 men. That made the game easier for Rangers, absolutely, but it was still a win. And it was a good result at home, and it gave Rangers a good chance of going through, which they did. As you can see in the very next game, 30th of July, they defeated Panathinaikos, well, overall in the tie, but they drew the second leg. I think it was Dessers, that got the equaliser for Rangers. No, it was Gassam, alright, my bad. So there you go, you've got Gassam scoring back-to-back goals in the Champions League. And Rangers get through against Panathinaikos, who are a pretty decent side, but maybe a team you'd expect Rangers to beat, especially over recent years. So far, so good. I think Russell Martin at this point, I don't think the fans were blown away by his football, but at this point, it was successful. He'd beat Panathinaikos at home. He drew against them away, and they were into the next round. He'd done his job up to this point. So, yeah, so far so good for Russell Martin. Right, then he plays his first league game of the season. They draw against Motherwell 1-1. Not a great performance. Motherwell should have won that game, in my opinion. Tavernier with a header, 14th minute in. Longello equalised 87th minute, and then Motherwell had a couple of chances to nick that game late on. Now, it's not a good result, but let's be honest, 1-1 at Fir Park. We've seen Rangers teams draw there before. We've seen good Rangers teams draw there before. So it's not like this is not an embarrassing result. Plus, after this game, Martin came out and he criticised the players, and a lot of people liked them for this because I guess they were kind of used to the Martin. They weren't really used to Martin yet, and they were giving them a chance, I guess. And they liked the fact he criticised the players, even though later on, after results were going against them, they didn't like the way he was criticising players. But they did enjoy Martin calling out some players that weren't performing, and that seemed to almost forgive him. So because he called out players for the performances, they almost forgave him for this game. So yeah, it was 1-1, but Martin calling out the players almost took the pressure off himself. Then he followed it up with a 3-0 win against Victoria Pilsen at home in the Champions League. Gassam with 2 goals, Dessers with a penalty. So Gassam at this point, 4 goals in 3 Champions League qualifying matches. Very good for him. And this pretty much guarantees Rangers qualification into the playoff round. A 3-0 win at home will do that for you. So at this point, he's won his 2 home games in the Champions League. He's got a draw against Panathinaikos in Greece and a draw against Motherwell at Fir Park, which isn't the worst result in the world. So at this point, I think his career was going okay. I think that the fans were not exactly buying into him, but they weren't really on his back. And as I explained, they almost forgave him for the draw against Motherwell because they liked how he reacted after the match, how he called out players, something they wanted previous managers to do. He never specified whether it was Tav or Raskin he was talking about, but the fans seemed to enjoy this. But this is where it goes downhill. Up next, he draws against Dundee. A very lucky draw. Gassam wins the penalty late on. Tavernier takes it. And they were lucky. Rangers didn't deserve to win that game, in my opinion. Dundee should have put them out of sight before it got to that penalty. But he gets a draw against Dundee, and at this point, already 4 behind Celtic. And I mean, most people were predicting Dundee to get relegated, finish dead last. So this was a really poor result for Rangers, no doubt about it, drawing against Dundee. And then he follows up the Dundee draw with a defeat against Victoria Pilsen. So, not great. You know, it follows up a bad draw with a defeat, and this was Russell Martin's first defeat in a Rangers dugout competitive game, at least. Now you could argue that it's not really a defeat because they still qualifying, and I guess you can make that claim. So at this point, you know, maybe it's not the end of the world. Yeah, he lost to Pilsen, but they were still through into the playoffs. So whatever. Who's counting? We then go into the League Cup. It was another poor game. Yeah, he beat Alloa by 4 goals to 2. But this was a close game, and Alloa were right in it till the end. And you should be comfortably beating Alloa at home. You're Rangers, for God's sake. And it wasn't even that weak of a team. You know, it was a pretty strong Rangers team they had out there. So I think to only sneak past Alloa, the game was 3-2 going into the dying minutes, and then Curtis came on and got the 4th. So yeah, this wasn't really building much confidence here with a 4-2 win over Alloa. Then he lost 3-1 at home to Club Brugge in the Champions League. And this, 3 goals in 20 minutes, this all but eliminated Rangers from the Champions League. Yeah, maybe that Danilo goal gave them slight hope, but 3-1 down going to Belgium, it was always going to be tough. So yeah, not a good result there at all. Then into the league again, they drew 1-1 against St Mirren. Again, very fortunate, came from behind, didn't deserve anything that day in Paisley. Another poor result. And at this point, I think that he was going into the Old Firm game needing a win. I think he needed a win to get the fans back on board, because already they were turning on him. They were turning on him after the Dundee game, and how did he follow that up with a defeat against Club Brugge and another draw against St Mirren? So I felt like going into the Celtic game he needed a win. Of course, he had a chance to pull off a miracle before that in the Club Brugge game, which he couldn't do, lost that 6-0. Had he, put up a respectable fight and got a draw away from home, or maybe even lost 2-1, I don't think it would have been that damaging, but to lose 6-0 and get embarrassed 9-1 on aggregate, I mean, this was another nail in the Martin coffin. Then we go into the game against Celtic. He gets a draw, which might, on paper, on a standalone result, a draw against Celtic isn't the end of the world, but when you're already, 6 points behind them, then you need to be winning that. 100% you need to be winning that game. And they didn't even get a shot on target. So that's abysmal. Not even a single shot on target. What were they doing? Can someone explain what the fuck happened there? Not a shot on target. So yeah, that was piss poor. They couldn't even register a shot, and honestly didn't look like winning that game. I thought they were okay in the first half. Second half they kind of fell away. Then they come back from the international break. Must-win game at home against Hearts, and they lost 2-0, deservedly lost. Now, some decisions went against them, I'll accept that, but overall, it was a very, very poor performance, and yeah, I mean, at this point, I think all the fans wanted him out. I think the Celtic game was his last chance to try and get the fans back on board. That didn't happen. Then he lost to Hearts. He followed that up with a 2-0 win over Hibernian in the Scottish League Cup, which he desperately needed, but I don't think progressing to a semi-final of the League Cup, that's not enough at this stage. After the start that he had in the league, definitely not. Then he had a defeat, in the first Europa League phase match against Genk, again losing 1-0 at home. Piss poor result, and considering O was really shite in that game, it could have been a lot more to Genk. It could have really been like 3-0 to Genk if O had his scoring boots on. So another defeat there in Europe. He then followed that up with a win against Livy, a late win against Livy, an undeserved win against Livy, a very late Max Aaron's 94th minute goal. So you're thinking, right, well maybe Martin's done something here. Can he go on a win and run? No, he couldn't, because his very next game he lost to Sturm Graz 2-1. Horrible defending. I think 2-1 flattered Rangers in this game. Probably could have lost by more. And then he follows up once again with another draw against another newly promoted side. So, yeah, just piss poor. And that was the final nail in the coffin. I think that his Rangers career was done after the draw against Celtic. You could argue that he didn't lose and that kept it alive. But at the end of the day, I mean, he just lost 9-1 on aggregate, so the fans were pretty much raging. If avoiding defeat in the Celtic game somehow saved his career, then definitely the defeat to Hearts, that was the final nail in the coffin, 100%. Yeah, he had a win against Livingston and a win against Hibernian after that, but I think the damage was already done at this point. Then the two early defeats in the Europa League phase don't help. But I think this Falkirk game, this wasn't good enough. After the defeat to Hearts, he needed to go on a win and run in the league. He really did, because League Cups in Europe are alright, but the league is what you're ultimately judged on. After the defeat to Hearts, they found themselves, 9 points behind Hearts, 9 points behind Celtic. Now, they beat Livy and they closed the gap to Celtic down to 7. And then while they were beating Falkirk, Celtic were losing to Motherwell. And at that point, I mean, the gap could have been closed down to 4. But it wasn't. Celtic ended up coming back and winning. Rangers drew against Falkirk. That opened the gap back up to 9. And I think at this point, he was rightfully sacked. Could he have been sacked before this? Probably, because the results were piss poor. But yeah, you look at Russell Martin. Overall, simply not good enough. His win percentage in the Scottish League Cup's good at 100%. Champions League win percentage 43%, not bad. Hasn't even got a win yet. I say not bad, it's pretty poor. He hasn't even got a win yet in the Europa League, but the Scottish Premiership, that is the telling point right there. 7 games played, only 6 goals scored. So he's scoring less than a goal a game. He's conceded 7, so he's got a goal difference of -1 after 7 league games, and a win percentage of 14.29. That is not acceptable. 14.29, that isn't good enough for any club in the Scottish Premiership. If you've got a win percentage of 14.29, you're probably getting relegated at the end of the season. So that kind of sums up Russell Martin at Rangers. It wasn't working out. He had to get sacked. You can argue when it all went wrong. I think that it started going downhill after the second. I'd say the last time he had the fans truly on board, or at least the last time the fans weren't wanting Martin out, was after he beat Pilsen 3-0. I think that was the last time that the fans were really backing Martin. After that, the draw against Dundee, and then following up with more draws, and then defeats in the Champions League. And yeah, I think that after the 3-0 Pilsen, it was all downhill for there, and that was like the last real good moment that Martin had. I get it, he beat Hibs after that, and he got a win against Livingston, but I think the Victoria Pilsen, his Rangers career was going okay. It was going okay up until that point, and then after that, it just completely went downhill. So there you go, guys. Let us know what your thoughts were. A lot of people think he should never got the job in the first place, but you have to give him a chance, and in the end, he didn't take that chance. So simple as that. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Been Folk Football. Review show coming later on tonight. And yeah, we might rank all the Russell Martin signings as his time at the club. So yeah, catch you guys later. Till next time. Peace.